Good evening. Welcome to UPARS Los Angeles. My name is Steve Murillo. I am the director for UPARS LA. Tonight we have a very, very important and special guest. I'm very proud to present Linda Moulton Howe. Speaking freely, you know, Linda was probably one of my first introductions to ufology. I came from a very pragmatic background. I was a pilot in the military and an engineer, and then I went to work for TRW as a satellite engineer, and I didn't have any time for UFOs, and I thought that it was all just nonsense. And then one day, I was at Blockbuster Video with my wife trying to figure out what to watch for a Friday night, and we came across this video called A Strange Harvest. And on the cover of this video is this cow lying sideways with some pieces missing. And I thought, that is bizarre. What is that? So I picked it up and went home and watched it. And, you know, it just blew my mind. And my wife got grossed out. But anyway, that sort of set me on course, opened my eyes a little bit to the fact that there are things happening on this planet that people don't talk about, but yet they're happening. And so, in my mind, Linda is not only a pioneer, but she's very bright, and she's got a lot of guts. Because I'm going to read her bio in a second, and you're going to realize how qualified this person is, and yet she's willing to put it all out on the line for you guys, really for the truth. And so I respect that highly. Linda Moulton Howe is a graduate of Stanford University with a master's degree in communication. She's devoted her documentary, film, television, radio writing, and reporting career to productions concerning science, medicine, and the environment. Linda has received local, national, and international awards, including 3 regional Emmys, a national Emmy nomination, and was honored producer for medical science programming in a WCVB Boston Station Peabody Award. Linda's award-winning documentaries have included Poison in the Wind, A Sun Kissed Poison, which compared smog pollution in Los Angeles to Denver, Fire in the Water, and then, of course, the one I mentioned. There were many others, but one of note to you guys is A Strange Harvest, that explored worldwide, not just locally, not just nationally, worldwide animal mutilation mysteries that have been haunting the United States and putting ranchers out of business since the 60s. And continue to date, by the way. As director of special projects at KMGH-TV in Denver, Colorado, she received the Aviation and Space Writers Association Award for writing excellence in television. In February 2017, Linda's new web TV series, The Truth Hunter, reported by Linda Moulton Howe, it has debuted on Gaia and is a big success there. She's getting a lot of viewership. On February 20th, 2016, Linda was honored at the LA's Hilton at the with a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Conscious Life Expo and the History Channel's Ancient Aliens TV program. In addition to her television productions, Linda produces, reports, and edits award-winning science, environment, and Earth mysteries on her website, Earth Files. She's been featured on Coast to Coast numerous times. She's been interviewed on Larry King Live. She is an authority in the subject. She does a monthly 3-hour radio news report on science, environment, and Earth mysteries, and it's on iHeart, so you can find her there. Linda has written 4 books, as if that wasn't enough: An Alien Harvest, about her investigation of the worldwide animal mutilation phenomenon, and government policies of denial and cover-up. In May of 2013, Linda participated as a journalist witness before several retired U.S. congressional representative panelists in the 2013 citizen hearing at the National Press Club, Washington, D.C., produced by Paradigm Research Group. Her topics were military intelligence, eyewitnesses, and physical evidence that confirm the interaction of non-humans with Earth, facts suppressed by U.S. policies of denial since World War II and probably before that. I could go on and on. This is her accomplishments just go pages and pages. This you guys are in for a treat. Linda Moulton Howe is right at the top of ufology. You guys know her from Ancient Aliens. You probably know her from all of her work. But please put your hands together. Warm welcome for Linda Moulton Howe.
Thank you. I recognize some of the faces from Conscious Life, from Contact, and it's nice to know that there are some people who are trying to keep up with real truth in spite of government policies of denial. And it is true, I could have had a career of doing just science and medical programming, and it was getting into the shock of global bloodless, trackless animal mutilations that was my walking through the Alice in Wonderland mirror, completely breaking and turning upside down my own paradigm. And I think, I hope, after this 2-hour program that I'm going to share with you tonight, that you will understand at your core why I or anyone could never walk away from this. 37 years ago, in September 1999, I did begin investigating worldwide bloodless animal mutilations, and to my great surprise, it was law enforcement who told me the perpetrators were, quote, creatures from outer space, close quote. And now, 3 decades later, we have rovers exploring on Mars and spacecraft showing us the first close-up images of Pluto's icy mountains and the bright white magnesium salt deposits in the crater on dwarf planet Ceres, and news that at the bottom of the 30-mile deep ocean on Saturn's moon Enceladus, there is hot water at nearly 200 degrees Fahrenheit, gushing from the sea floor and spouting through the surface ice, apparently heated by radioactive material in the core. That provoked scientists to wonder if there really are swimming creatures in that surprisingly warm moon water. As the future rushes toward us with a persistent mixture of lies and truths, I would like to sharpen focus on what was happening 69 years ago when the front page of the Roswell Daily Record on July 8, 1947 was headlined, quote, Roswell, Army airfield captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region. No details of flying disc are revealed, close quote. We now know that during a thunderstorm late at night on July 3rd to 4th, 1947, 3 aerial objects merged on radar before 3 crash sites were found. The headline about one came from Colonel William Blanchard, commanding officer of the 509th Bomb Wing at the Roswell Army Airfield. Colonel Blanchard ordered his public information officer, Walter Hott, to issue a press release announcing that one of those flying saucers that people had been reporting that summer had crashed northwest of Roswell near Corona. Strange debris had been found by sheep rancher Mac Brazel on July 4th. 3 days later, on July 7th, the head of the Roswell Army Airfield's 509th Bomber Group Intelligence Unit, Lieutenant Colonel Jesse Marcel Sr., went to the Brazel Ranch with Counterintelligence Corps agent Sheridan Cavett to investigate and gather up peculiar silver foil that folded like cloth. Plus, there were long, thin I-beams with purple symbols on them. The next day, on July 8th, after the story broke on the front page of the Roswell Daily Record, the head of the 8th Air Force in Fort Worth, Texas, Brigadier General Roger Ramey, held a press conference with his Chief of Staff, Colonel Thomas Dubose, with a concocted story to say there was no flying saucer. It was just a weather balloon that exploded in the thunderstorm. To strengthen his phony story, General Ramey had pieces of shredded weather balloons spread on the floor to be photographed so newspapers would run with his fake news, specifically to keep the public and the media from knowing about the alien presence. Even Lieutenant Colonel Jesse Marcel Sr. was asked to fly from Roswell to Fort Worth to pose for photos amid weather balloon debris. But Colonel Marcel knew that what he had gathered that day before from the Brazil Ranch, it was not a weather balloon. 5 years later, in 1952, President Truman's Majestic 12 special panel described in their first annual report about the retrieval of, quote, unidentified plan form, a word that was used in the 40s, plan form, delta-shaped, curved, plan form space vehicles, and stated, quote, radar film and tower logs do not explain the merging of 3 radar targets prior to collision and subsequent crashes. There were 5 recovered bodies, and recovered is misspelled in the original report, 2 of which were found in a severely damaged escape cylinder, and the remaining 3 bodies were found some distance away from that cylinder. All 5 appeared to have suffered from sudden decompression and heat suffocation. Suffocation is also misspelled in the original report, close quote. So there were 3 radar targets and 3 crash sites. Landing zone 1 was near Corona, about 75 miles northwest of Roswell. An interplanetary phenomenon unit summary on July 22, 1947, in paragraph 12 stated, quote, the most disturbing aspect of this investigation was there were other bodies found not far from landing zone 1 that looked as if they had been dissected as you would a frog, close quote. They did not explain whether the bodies that were dissected were animal, human, or alien. Animal parts were reportedly discovered inside the craft at landing zone 2. I have talked with a rancher who talked with Mac Brazel, so I'm third hand. And the rancher told me that Mac Brazel said it's a horrible secret, and that one of the secrets that was never reported because the military and the government paid Mac Brazel a lot of money to keep his mouth shut. And one of the secrets was that inside of the craft at landing zone 2, as they prodded and pushed around on the walls, suddenly a drawer opened, and inside were animal parts. Landing zone 2 was 20 miles southeast of Socorro, not far from Oscura Peak, in the Red Circle area, southeast of the Trinity site and White Sands Proving Ground, where the United States tested its first atomic bomb 2 years earlier in July 1945. It was only 2 years apart. First the atomic bomb test, then Japan, and then in 1947 came the UFOs. Landing zone 2 is also where animal parts were reportedly found inside a well-preserved capsule that might have been ejected from the crash vehicle at landing zone 1 in Corona. The idea is, I've talked with several military people about this. They now, I think the government is convinced, something happened in those 3 radar targets that came together on the thunderstorm night at around midnight between July 3 and 4. One of those radar targets went in an arc toward Corona, but when it came down toward or near Corona, it ejected an emergency pod. It went over the Oscura Peak and came down on White Sands. That is landing zone 2 that was not destroyed and had the well-preserved bodies. The reference to plan form, as you can see in that red line under the word in this Majestic 12 project, first annual report in 1952, did mean then, and does to this day, delta or crescent shape. That could be like the heel of a shoe, which is the shape in this photograph taken over Phoenix, Arizona on July 7th, 1947. And that was the same week as the Roswell crashes. Now notice the curve here. You could say this was the back of the heel of a shoe, or some people said it was like a horseshoe, and see this cupola here. This is the correct photo. This is the man who took the photo. He was using a box camera. It was William A. Rhodes, and he had been a flight instructor during World War II at Falcons Field in Phoenix, and he loved taking photographs of airplanes that flew in the sky, and then he gets this that goes on the Arizona Republic. But on Wednesday, July 9th, 1947, the Arizona Republic in Phoenix put the Rhodes photograph upside down. We just looked at it. They put it on the front page. They didn't realize. They published it upside down on the front of the newspaper. And this same plan, form, shape, especially in the correct position, has been described and sketched by other retired military eyewitnesses of UFOs that have had this identical shape. But you don't hear a lot about that shape, almost as if the government wanted to make sure everybody talked about a flying saucer that was round. The 3 crashed aerial machines of unknown origin provoked General Ramey to carry out orders for a strict policy of denial and secrecy from President Harry Truman. Allegedly, though, 6 years before 1947, President Roosevelt and then Missouri Senator Truman had already dealt with a UFO and 3 dead aliens. In his 2016 book called Mo 41, meaning Missouri, in 1941, The Bombshell Before Roswell, author Paul Blake Smith writes that on the night of April 12, 1941, a crescent-shaped UFO crashed near Cape Girardeau, Missouri. Cape Girardeau is 115 miles southeast of St. Louis, and Sikeston is 35 miles south of Cape Girardeau. The Missouri Institute for Aeronautics is in Sikeston, and local residents told Paul Smith that a crescent-shaped craft and 3 identical small bodies, quote, not from this world, close quote, were picked up by a crew from the Missouri Institute for Aeronautics, and they picked it up from a farm about 8 miles south of Cape Girardeau. Today, we would call those 3 bodies identical clones. One MJ-12 document leaked in the 1990s to aerospace engineer Dr. Bob Wood is entitled MJ-12 Project, White Hot Intelligence Estimate Preliminary, dated September 19, 1947, only 2.5 months after the Roswell region UFO crashes. Classified Magic Eyes Only, Part 3, Scientific Probabilities. It states, quote, based on all available evidence collected from recovered exhibits, the plan-form UFOs currently under study by, and it lists 11 government and military agencies and MIT, those craft are deemed extraterrestrial in nature. This conclusion was reached as a result of comparisons of artifacts from the Missouri discovery in 1941, and they're referencing Cape Girardeau. The technology is outside the scope of U.S. science, even outside that of German rocket and aircraft development, close quote. Part 2, Technical Evaluation, paragraph 18 states, quote, the following elements were analyzed and found to exist in the small neutronic power plant that was found inside U-Lot 1, all caps -1, an acronym for UFO plan form. And this one stands for unidentified lenticular shaped aerodyne. Even the recovery case of 1941, meaning Cape Girardeau, Missouri, did not create a unified intelligence effort to exploit possible technological gains, with the exception of the Manhattan Project, close quote. The reference to the Manhattan Project means physicist Robert Oppenheimer had the Cape Girardeau neutronic power plant to study. It was hand-delivered to him during his development of the atomic bomb first dropped on Japan in August 1945, ending World War II. That also implies that Presidents Roosevelt and Truman already knew about an alien presence during World War II, before the July 1947 Roswell crashes, and they had made a decision to keep everything secret about UFOs and the ETs they had retrieved, both dead and alive. And every high-serving person, FDR, Secretary of War George Marshall, Secretary of State Cordell Hull, the head of the War Department's budget, then Democratic Senator Harry Truman, they were all 33rd degree Masons. And they honored secrecy. Much of the content in those early reports was drawn from what Lieutenant General Nathan Twining discovered on his secret mission for President Truman soon after the New Mexico crashes. That's when General Twining viewed the 5 alien bodies and craft found at Landing Zone 2 near Oscura Peak and the Trinity site. In 1947, General Twining was commander of the Air Materiel Command, and 10 years later, President Eisenhower would appoint him chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Well, by July 16, 1947, only 1 week after the Roswell Daily headline, General Twining sent President Truman a 2-page report from his personal investigation in New Mexico about what he saw for himself at the Landing Zone 2 crash site near Oscura Peak on the White Sands Proving Ground. Quote, General Twining, upon examination of the interior of the craft, a compartment exhibiting a possible atomic engine was discovered. In the power room was, 1, a donut-shaped tube approximately 35 feet in diameter made of what appears to be a plastic material that is surrounding a central core. This tube was translucent, approximately 1 inch thick. The tube appeared to be filled with a clear substance, possibly a heavy water. This activation of electrical potential is believed to be the primary power to the reactor, though it is only a theory at present. Just how a heavy water reactor functions in this environment is unknown. On the deck of the power room, there are what resembles typewriter keys, possibly reactor power plant controls. There were no conventional electronics nor wiring to be seen connecting these controls to the propulsion turret, close quote. I have been told by some of the people before they died who were there in the whole Roswell region that there were keys. They had strange hieroglyphic type symbols on them. And the 1952 MJ-12 first annual report said, quote, the technology in these craft may be eons ahead of us, meaning thousands of years beyond us on Earth. Another military insider from World War II and the Eisenhower and Kennedy presidencies did a 1997 book, the day after Roswell, about what he knew firsthand of UFO extraterrestrial technologies and ETs while working in the Pentagon. Lieutenant Colonel Philip J. Corso worked as chief of the Pentagon's Foreign Technology Desk for General Arthur Trudeau, who was handpicked by President Dwight Eisenhower in 1958 to be the first director of Army Research and Development in the Pentagon. And the reason he chose him is because Eisenhower respected General Trudeau more than any military officer that he knew during World War II, because Arthur Trudeau was the only general that had a PhD, and it was in engineering. So Eisenhower reached out to the one and only PhD in the military to do this new work in Army Research and Development, of which at the core was getting extraterrestrial technology from crashes into the Pentagon to decide how to back engineer them. General Trudeau on the right handpicked Colonel Corso after their trusted days together in World War II. And Colonel Corso told me about the day he was first asked by General Trudeau, who he had known from the Italy campaign in World War II, to come up to his office inside of the Pentagon. And there the general walked over to some metal 4-drawer standing file cabinets and started opening up drawer by drawer and handing over to Colonel Corso, with the general saying, these are extraterrestrial artifacts that we have retrieved from these UFO crashes. And the general asked Colonel Corso to secretly hand deliver ET artifacts from his Pentagon file cabinet drawers to selected contacts in a few American corporations that the general told Corso, only one person knows, and that one person I know is the only person I have contacted. Whether it is Boeing, whether it is Corning Glass, whichever it is, one person. They signed secrecy agreements, and this is how the back engineering under control with the Pentagon with a hand around American corporations, with the idea the American corporations are going to be able to back engineer, patent, make a lot of money on, but this will keep the extraterrestrial technology in the United States and out of the hands of our perceived enemies in Germany and Russia and wherever else. And General Trudeau and President Eisenhower wanted these extraterrestrial technologies to be kept entirely in the United States, but at the same time, no one in Congress, no one in the Supreme Court, and no tax-paying American public was to know anything. General Trudeau and Colonel Corso were the beginning of the United States' serious efforts to develop a secret space program that would use retrieved extraterrestrial technology for advancement. Meanwhile, NASA, under CIA control right from the very beginning of its birth, would be the public camouflage for what was behind the scenes, a dark and growing underbelly of America, spending billions and billions of secret dollars, but unknown and untouchable. In June 1997, Time magazine did a cover story on the 50th anniversary of the Roswell crashes, and I was there to speak for that 50th commemoration. There I met and talked with Colonel Corso about his work for General Trudeau, and when Colonel Corso was introduced to me, he extended his hand to shake mine, and he said, "Linda, how the hell did you get so much classified information?" And he had already read my book, An Alien Harvest. And he knew from his own research in the Pentagon that animal mutilations were done by extraterrestrials. And he had heard about my documentary, A Strange Harvest, the first broadcast May 28, 1980 on Denver's CBS station KMGH-TV, where I was director of special projects. And that is when sheriffs and ranchers did tell me over and over, scene to scene, the perpetrators, save you some time, Linda, the perpetrators are creatures from outer space. Why? Ranchers had seen glowing lights in night skies literally emit beams down into their pastures. A few had even seen a cow lifted up in a beam of light or lowered down into pastures dead and mutilated. But none of those eyewitnesses would stand in front of my TV camera for fear of ridicule. Before he died, Colonel Corso talked to me in private about the highly classified documents that he had read in Washington, D.C., dated as early as 1951, about animals found in several parts of the world with bloodless excisions and no tracks around them. Colonel Corso said the classified reports that he read specified that the perpetrators of animal mutilations were extraterrestrial biological entities, but why? This illustration is by a Missouri horse rancher in 1975 who saw this glowing being at his gate during a time when he found several newborn foals and young horses bloodlessly mutilated in his pasture. Eventually, our government would realize that many of the UFO so-called pilots and other non-human entities were actually cloned androids or human ET hybrids produced from genetic harvest of Earth life, including from animal mutilations and human sperm and egg extractions in human abductions. Our government, according to Colonel Corso, learned that in spite of the mutilations and abductions, some ETs are friendly, and they want humanity to advance faster, to be more protected from unfriendly ETs. So there was urgency in General Trudeau's goal to get alien technologies back engineered and patented as fast as possible, to keep them from Germany and Russia, and to support a secret space program that might have to do battle in real Star Wars. About secret ET technology transfer to American corporations for back engineering and patents, Colonel Corso wrote, quote, General Trudeau also had relationships with the Army contractors who were developing new weapon systems for the military within one part of the company, while another part was harvesting some of the same ET technology for consumer product development. These were companies such as Bell Labs, IBM, Monsanto, Dow, RCA that became General Electric, and the aviation and medical companies owned by Howard Hughes, close quote. At that July 1997 50th anniversary conference, Dr. Jesse Marcel Jr. handed me this replica of the thin I-beam he remembered holding in the first week of July 1947. That's when his father, Jesse Marcel Sr., the head of intelligence at the Roswell Army Airfield, woke up Jesse and his mother to show them pieces of the strange I-beams and silver foil that Jesse Marcel Sr. had picked up at one of the 3 UFO crash sites that first week of July 1947. And that was the one site between Roswell and Corona. Jesse Marcel Sr. said the metallic foil was like cloth that could be folded or crumpled up, but would always return to its original flat, unwrinkled shape. Jesse Jr. told me that his father said the debris, quote, was not of this earth, close quote. Young Jesse Marcel was most curious about what he described as metallic pinkish purple hieroglyphs or symbols that ran along the entire length of a tan-colored I-beam, only 3/8 of an inch wide. The I-beam was so lightweight that Jesse Jr. said he could barely feel it in his hand, that it was more like holding air. Plastics did not exist publicly in 1947, but eyewitnesses would later on compare the I-beams to new lightweight plastic or balsa wood. There were rumors that scientists had discovered the I-beams were an exotic hybrid of metal like wood, and it could not be cut or burned at any temperature. Intelligence officer Jesse Marcel Sr. would himself compare the strange pink-purple symbols to, quote, indecipherable Chinese writing, close quote. 12 years after the 1947 Roswell UFO cover-up began, Brigadier General Stephen Lufkin has said that he was briefed at the Pentagon in 1959 about the Roswell UFO crashes. And at that time, he was shown thin I-beams with what he called purplish encryptions. That means encoding messages or information in such a way that only authorized parties can read it. Another source, Steve Lytle, reported that his mathematician father was asked by government authorities to decipher the I-beam symbols, but no one ever was able to, and those weren't the only mysterious symbols to show up on UFOs. In 1803, on the east coast of Japan in the Hitachi province, fishermen reported that a pale, red-headed, alien-looking woman suddenly emerged from under the ocean waters in a round craft that had symbols on its surface. The woman was inside the craft clutching a box. Eyewitnesses called her Utsuro Bune, meaning ship hole, because her sea craft was shaped like a rice bowl. People who saw the craft said the top was like it was made of glass or crystal. And when the red-haired woman spoke, it was in a language that no Japanese person had ever heard before. What language was she speaking? Where did she come from? What was in the box? Nobody knew then or now. But eyewitnesses claimed the same red-haired woman and craft were reported in many other parts of Japan as if she were flying around in that craft. She was always reported to be tightly holding the box. 177 years later, on December 26, 1980, after midnight, Staff Sergeant James Peniston at RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge in England would also encounter a strange craft with symbols in Rendlesham Forest. When Sergeant Peniston dragged his fingers over the symbols, he said his mind was filled with zeros and ones of binary code and telepathic impressions of a time machine from a distant future where an advanced civilization was dying out. Its mission was to harvest genetic material from Earth to use as, quote, Band-Aids to extend the future civilization's survival. There was no pilot. The triangular craft operated with alien self-activating software. Now here is a comparison of two Utsuro Bune symbols marked with red circles that are variations on the Jim Peniston triangle and circle symbols down here. Here are, through history, these are the symbols that were on the crystal-covered craft. And when you look at this one, and you look at this one, and you look here, Utsuro Bune, and then you look at Jim Peniston, it's interesting that that pattern seems to be of the same kind of whatever language that we are dealing with. And we're going to see this same triangle circle symbol again as recently as 2015 in a UFO encounter. But first, on August 28, 1991, 11 years after Sergeant Peniston touched the symbols on the alien craft in Rendlesham Forest, Soviet authorities were tracking a UFO on a zigzag course at 4,225 miles an hour. The rapid radar track vanished over Kyrgyzstan. A year later, in June 1992, they finally got a search party there, and they found a cylinder-shaped craft with strange green symbols on it. The investigators reported, quote, powerful electromagnetic field emanating from the wreckage, close quote. And all of the photographs and the videotape recordings were overexposed. Same thing happened in Rendlesham Forest. The photographs that some of the people that were out there with Geiger counters, and they tried to take photographs, and all of their photographs were overexposed. This craft had come down in what is known as the Shaitan Mazar Gorge. It's also called the Devil's Grave, and it's in the central Tian Shan Mountains of eastern Kyrgyzstan. And then, 14 years after that, in late June 2015, an Army sergeant with his wife, 2 young children, dog, and a cat began moving from Hunter Army Airfield and Richmond Hill, Georgia, on the Atlantic Ocean, where the red circle is down here. So we're going to go, they wanted to go to Fort Carson in Colorado. And their plan was to go through Atlanta and Nashville, and Army Sergeant, that I call CJ, set his truck's GPS for the route, and the family planned to travel at night when it was cooler with less traffic and stay in motels during the day. Sergeant CJ and his wife were shocked when a bright white light in the sky suddenly came down toward them. The Army sergeant estimated that the disk hovering above their truck was 820 feet long, and that's nearly 3 football fields, and nearly 200 feet high. Bright white sparks projected out beyond the craft in the front and the back, and below the midline there was a row of 5 dark colored symbols. And he told me, quote, "In the Army, I'm a trained observer. I've been doing it for 15 years. I'm able to identify high-velocity rounds as well as mortars, rockets, artillery, aircraft, all types of aircraft. I'm trained to do that for whatever comes down in front of us on military missions. This huge craft was way beyond anything that I have been trained for," close quote. Sergeant CJ's wife remembered the UFO's surface glistened to her eyes like an oil-slick rainbow of colors when it tilted toward them. And she also thought that there were round lights around the perimeter. This encounter was one of the details, and you're dealing with a military Army guy whose job, he's trained to notice everything. And he does know, as disorienting as everything was, he looked at his watch, and he always did this at work. He looked at his watch, and it was 1:25 a.m., and when this thing disappeared, it was 1:29 a.m. on the watch, Eastern Time. And this was on the early morning of June 29th, 2015. And he and his wife both, who I've talked to extensively, they said this didn't move. This just blinked out. 820 feet, right in front, up, maybe 200 feet. It's there, and then it's not there. The couple felt confused and disoriented. Sergeant CJ drove up the road a few miles and found what's called a Shake Rag Express. It's on Highway 1 South. And when he tried to get out of the truck, he said his legs felt like wet noodles, as if he could not stand up, and he didn't know what was wrong. But the greater shock was when he finally got into the store and got some food. The Shake Rag Express receipt showed they were in Wadley, Georgia, way off their GPS course to Atlanta and on to Colorado. They had started down here. They were going to go to Atlanta. Something happened in the high strangeness, and they end up here without ever knowing. They had no idea, and he's trained military, uses GPS all the time. He never had a clue. But whatever it was that happened, he would agree that an alien intelligence did something and manipulated their minds in order to get them off of that main track to a place where the UFO and what was inside of it could interact with them. Now, let's stop for a minute and compare the June 29th, 2015. Here's this symbol again. This is a triangle. It's got the little circles on it. And look at Jim Peniston's from RAF Bentwaters. Whoops, I want to do one more. And then here is this one, June 29th, Wadley. And it's also in the same genre as Jim Peniston, RAF Bentwaters, December 26, 1980. And as we keep going deeper, the issue of surface symbols is a major part of alien technology that produces self-activating software. Sergeant CJ and his wife were so confused and they were exhausted, and he got back on a different road and make sure that they're heading for Atlanta. And they finally checked into the Magnuson Hotel. This is just a little north of Atlanta. At 7:36 a.m. on June 29, 2015. They slept in the day, and then they got back on the road, headed for Kentucky. And this credit card there. This is a receipt for the Motel 6 of Paducah, Kentucky, and it shows that CJ and his family checked in over here at 5:36 a.m. on June 30th, 2015. Everybody needed sleep badly, and they all went to bed. But Sergeant CJ found himself waking up in their Motel 6 bathroom, holding a ballpoint pen in one hand, and this in the other hand, staring at the back of this receipt covered with squares and ones that trail off into WTF question mark. And during our first interview about this high strangeness, he asked that his voice be electronically altered because he is active Army and he wants to remain anonymous. He's in another part of the world now. He's very dangerous. I saw him and his family about 5 months ago. Hopefully he will make it back in one piece, and we will continue because I'm going to tell what we're going into is still happening to him today. And Sergeant CJ had a very vivid dream also. And he knows that he had the dream at some point before he became conscious, standing like this in the bathroom door. And in the dream, light gray alien beings wearing dark lenses over eyes, similar to but larger than human eyes, are warning about a threat to Earth. Have you seen the symbols in sleep or in your mind's eye?
Usually in my sleep, and that first time that it happened was in that hotel. I do not remember getting out of bed and walking into the bathroom with a pen in my hotel sheet and doing that. I literally woke up standing there after I had finished.
Have the symbols been repeated in addition to the squares and the vertical lines?
Yeah, I've seen them again. It's great.
Can you describe that dream?
Yeah, they start all the way around, and they're being scrolled past from right to left. They're slightly illuminated, like a light blue color.
Are you getting any impression of what they are saying in your dreams?
Something Council of 5, I believe.
Council of 5, and what do they say?
More of a warning, preparation or something. I know what may come, or what could come, or what is soon to come, or something to that effect. And they're doing what they can to try to help us. They're almost to the point where they're outnumbered, and we're going to need to assist and get to where we need to be sooner in order to be able to stand a chance.
Did you see any humanoids of any shape or size or type in any of your dreams?
Yes, ma'am.
Which type?
Skin similar to ours, however, grayish in color, elongated heads, larger sockets for eyes, larger eyes. In the dream that I was seeing, there was one about where my feet would be, and I could see expressions on his face as a little bit of worry, but was trying to keep being calm.
Did you get the telepathic impressions of warning there aren't enough of us, there's more of them, something is going to happen that's going to be a big problem, and that these beings have been trying to help and now they can't because they don't have enough numbers versus what is there?
Similar, perhaps, but I think it's more along the lines of what we're doing that's going to harm us, such as sending signals up to space is not a safe thing to do, that we have technology that we need to expand on, but it's being kept permanently behind locked doors or closed doors, and only to certain individuals or something to that effect, and allow all minds to come together to get things done a little bit quicker.
Or what is going to happen?
Where it's going to happen might negatively affect us. I don't know what that might be, though.
And if there is a warning or an alert, that would imply that something is coming that may be harmful.
I don't know. I know it's something that will affect us here on Earth. I know that our current advancement in technology and how we're progressing is happening too slow. And the way to fix that is opening it up and allowing everyone here who is kept in the dark or not being told the information. We need to allow outside minds in order to solve the issues that we're having, to increase our advancement in technology and speed up our process for advancement.
If that doesn't happen, what bad could happen?
I really don't have an answer to that.
About the Council of Five, Sergeant CJ told me he had never heard about any council outside of that dream. And when you Google ET or Alien Council of Five, I had never heard of it before interviewing him. This is one of the websites that comes up that lists 5 alleged alien races that include all caps EMERTHER, Emerther. The website Alien Axioms describes the Emerther as, quote, one of the founder races of the Council of Five, ancient and more advanced on many levels than most cosmic intelligences. Allegedly, it was the Emerther that wanted to meet with or did meet American President Dwight Eisenhower, perhaps because the Emerthers wanted atomic bomb testing stopped because we were tearing into other dimensions that we did not even know existed, close quote. The website states, without giving information sources, quote, very little is known about the 5 alien races that make up the Council of Five. These 5 races have been protecting Earth and humans for a long time and last met together on this planet in 1944, close quote. I asked Sergeant CJ why he thought advanced intelligences would be communicating with Earth humans in binary code. And he replied, quote, maybe it's like the yin and yang symbol of black and white. So zeros and ones can be used all over the universe to communicate, close quote. On Earth, this is what standard ASCII 8-bit binary code looks like. It starts with the number 0 right here, and you can see 0 in ASCII is 0011 space 0000. Capital letters are different combinations of zeros and ones from lowercase letters. There's punctuation such as periods and commas. Each have their own 8-bit code designators. Australian geneticist Horace Drew, PhD, volunteered to translate Sergeant CJ's squares and ones. And here is the first page so you can get a look at how people do this. And it shows the numbers that are creating each of continue us protection of humanity, what appears to be a latitude-longitude, expose hidden knowledge to all citizens, advancement, imperative for planetary survival, beware of Orion 1350.3, and Z reticuli 39.1 ? 70, avoid signal messages sent. And here is the whole translation for all the squares and lines Sergeant C.J. wrote on the back of his Motel 6 letter-sized receipt in Paducah, Kentucky. Continuous protection of humanity, a latitude, longitude, we'll get into in a minute. Expose hidden knowledge to all citizens. Advancement imperative for planetary survival. Beware of Orion 1350.3 and Z reticuli 39.1. Avoid signal messages sent. Horace Drew in Sydney said, quote, "The Orion Nebula is 1,350 light years from Earth. The binary star system of Zeta Reticuli is 39.17 light years from Earth. Further, Zeta Reticuli 1 is supposed to be the original solar system source of the gray aliens," close quote, and the reference is the 1961 Betty and Barney Hill case in New Hampshire. That's where the couple encountered gray ETs that said they were from the binary star system, Zeta Reticuli 1 and 2, or they didn't say it. That was Marjorie Fish, the astronomer, amateur astronomer, looking at Betty's map drawn under hypnosis and concluding that what she had drawn was Zeta Reticuli 1 and 2. The final line, avoid signal messages sent, seems to relate to CJ's dream information about the danger of Earth when we send out SETI signals without knowing who is on the other end. And that same warning came in 2015 from Elon Musk and Bill Gates and physicist Stephen Hawking that we should not be sending out lots of radio signals into space that could be picked up by some alien intelligence that is hostile. Let's go back to the first line that says, continuous protection of humanity, 49 degrees, 27 minutes north, and 11 degrees, 5 minutes east. If that latitude and longitude are supposed to be a location on Earth where ETs from the Council of Five are protecting humans, how odd that it turns out to be the town center of Nuremberg, Germany. Nuremberg was a significant city for the Nazis in World War II, and the location of the international war crime trials after the war ended. But Nuremberg was also famous more than 400 years ago in 1561, when immense black cylinders appeared in an early dawn sky and released many strange smaller blue, black, red, and orange spheres, rods, and crosses. Many people watched the aerial machines clash in battle above a great black spear that remained stationary for the hour-long conflict. Some UFOs crashed and burned in the lower part of this woodcut. Some UFOs were described, and this is why this German artist, Hans Glaser, made this woodcut. So who in that aerial UFO battle might have been protecting humanity? As stated in the Sergeant C.J. binary code, quote, continuous protection of humanity, and the latitude longitude is Nuremberg, Germany. What could the battle be about? Well, let's go deeper into binary code messages by comparing Sergeant C.J.'s string of zeros and ones to Sergeant Jim Peniston's back on December 26, 1980. That was the night that Sergeant Peniston, with Airman First Class John Burroughs and Airman Ed Kavansak, were ordered into Rendlesham Forest to investigate strange colored lights moving around in the tall forest on civilian land that ran along RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge, then NATO's largest airbase. Here is page 1 of the binary code written down by Sergeant Peniston after he touched the raised symbols on the surface of a mysterious black, glassy, triangular craft on the forest ground. Now, these red marks, as you see, they're marking off the zeros and ones, and this is how, as translators, they go through. Here's E, here's X, E, X, P, L, O, R, A, T, I, O, N. See, you can, as we're going through, this is how we're getting these words. It's from what these numbers combinations mean in ASCII in terms of alphabet, punctuation, capitals, and lower cases. Exploration of humanity, numbers that everybody has disagreed about, and this number was clear, 8100. This is page 2 of Penniston's binary code that translates also to a latitude, longitude, and the word continuous. Page 3 for continuous for planetary advance. This is the theme here in CJ and Penniston about humans have to advance faster in order to survive. Coordinate, continuous, question mark, CEPR, question mark, the word before, and after the word before, his notebook trails off. This is the end of the transmission. Now, after the first 5 pages of code were translated, Penniston then released one more batch of zeros and ones. This is Penniston's personally approved and official release of his binary code translations, in which 6 more latitude longitudes are added for High Brazil, Caracol, Belize. Here's High Brazil, Caracol, Belize. Sedona, Arizona, the Great Pyramid in Giza, Egypt, the Nazca Lines in Peru, Taishanku in China, and the portal at the Temple of Apollo in Naxos, Greece. And then the mysterious words, all caps, eyes of your eyes, followed by a repeat of the controversial latitude longitude of either High Brazil or Woodbridge. And in the last line it says origin year 8100. Now if you subtract Earth year 1980 from 8100, you get 6,120 years. Penniston thinks these were time travelers from the future. Under hypnosis, he said they were from 40,000 years in the future, dying out, and that they could come back in time. And there was something very important about Earth genetics to whatever it is that's desperate to survive, and that's why they were harvesting genetic material from this Earth to use as Band-Aids to stay alive 40,000 years in the future. But if this is the reality of his binary transmissions, the 6,120 years, if the origin year was 8100, depends on what the communication was, then it's not 40,000 years in the future, it's 6,120 years in the future. But it can also be argued that the time travelers from a distant future, maybe even in another dimension and on a different timeline, were not referring to Earth-based 365-day year cycles of time. And it's also important to understand that Penniston did not have a single decimal placement in any of his strings of zeros and ones. So each latitude and longitude had to be calculated over and over and over 24 times, combinations of permutations, by the geneticist, by an astrophysicist, an engineer. We had a lot of people doing this. So each latitude and longitude in a string of zeros and ones, if there's not a designation of the decimal point, it can be any one of 24 possibilities per latitude, longitude. Now, in the second latitude and longitude, right here, it says Hi Brazil, but that came about because of Ancient Aliens. We were working with the History Channel's Ancient Aliens, and it was possible that the latitude longitude could be calculated out of the zeros and ones for at least two places. The scientists that I was working with, they definitely said, this is not Hi Brazil, this is directly dead center, Town Hall, Woodbridge, England. And when you are in Woodbridge, which John and Jim and I and others, we've been there a lot, the town hall is a geographic center as well as a cultural and a politic center. It's an absolutely dead center town hall, which makes it even more interesting that it could have been the alternative in the binary translation, but the TV program liked the idea of the mythical Hi Brazil, so it turned out that depending upon if you moved the decimal point one way, you could end up going west from Woodbridge, and you would end up in the Atlantic Ocean at a place that would be very similar to what grew up in Ireland and Western England as a mythology. And it was a story that every 7 years, only every 7 years, this island would suddenly appear in the Atlantic Ocean, the Hi Brazil, and that there were people who would get in boats and they would try to go out to this strange island, and they never could reach it. They'd stay in the boats and they'd see it, and they never ever could get to land. And that is the mythical mystery of the name Hi Brazil from centuries past that Ancient Aliens chose to put there. The scientists think that it was Woodbridge, and as one of the astrophysicists I was working with on this, he said to me, if we are dealing with self-activating software by extremely advanced civilizations that can send out craft, can send out drones, can send out hybrids, they can do anything they want that are completely self-sufficient and completely self-sustaining. They don't need the prime intelligence. But they are always going to have to be downloading and uploading information to whatever it was that sent them. And that's why they thought it made sense that whatever this machine was, the black triangle, as a time machine, it would have to be constantly sending out locations in numbers that would translate to latitude, longitudes on a sphere, anywhere in the universe. All machines would be relating to grids on spheres for location. Let's now compare Sergeant CJ's first June 30th, 2016 binary translation on the top, 35 years after Sergeant Peniston's first binary release from his December 26th encounter on the bottom. And what's important to keep in mind here are the repetitions, because we are talking about two completely different individuals, 35 years in time, but it's like the same type of message, continuous. It's about humanity. I guess this doesn't, oh, there it is. Sometimes it seems to absorb humanity, and always this theme for planetary survival. Humans must advance, continuously advance for planetary survival. Another warning about planetary survival came in this binary code discovered in a wheat field next to Crabwood Copse in the village of Pitt near Winchester, Hampshire, England on August 15, 2002. The gray alien head and binary code disk are in front of BBC's Winchester tall broadcast antenna back here. And these thin lines are thought to simulate an early 20th century TV broadcast. Some of you may have remembered what TV was like. True, I do. The implication seemed to be that the crop formation was a reply to Earth TV signals. But was the warning from the alien depicted in the wheat holding the binary disc, or was the warning about the alien in the wheat pattern? The three star-like objects here on the alien shoulder resemble the famous Orion belt star, so many people think there is a threat from something associated with the Orion constellation. The start of the Crabwood August 15, 2002 binary spiral of code in wheat begins right here. 0100 and continues, here it is, the letter B, 01000010, and that expands into the word beware. And here is the full message from that crop formation. Beware the bearers of false gifts and their broken promises, much pain, but still time. Believe there is good out there. We oppose deception, conduit closing. And in fact, in the original binary, because I was with some of the people in England when they were translating, and I remember somebody said, "My God, the binary is it was a symbol, or it was a binary for when the bell went off in the old telegrams. There would be a when there was the end, and it actually was indicating a ring." A similar message was repeated 13 years later on June 23, 2015, near the airport of Turin, Italy, also known as Torino. This city is where Jesus Christ's alleged burial shroud is kept. Geneticist Horace Drew from Sydney, Australia, tackled these very difficult rings of binary code that included 128 of these small circles in all these straight lines, 128 of these, and the number of rays in going around this, there's 16, 128 small circle lines and 16 triangular rays on the outermost ring. And his binary translation of that outer ring is Timeo et ferentes, which translates in English to beware ET bearing gifts. Same themes in all of these translations. Horace Drew said the Torino, Italy, June 23, 2015 summer solstice wheat pattern, quote, looks like a clock where we have to rotate the inner wheel to match the outer wheel, close quote. He has told and been on the record saying this is the single most complicated of anything that he's ever encountered. They've still never cracked all of the binary code in this formation in Torino, June 23rd, 2015. And even though the inner ring binary code is not clear, Dr. Drew thinks some of it warns about a Trojan horse event coming to Earth. He wonders if the Trojan horse is an invasion attack by the gray ETs from Orion and Zeta Reticuli that have been warned about by Sergeant CJ's binary code, and Sergeant CJ's binary code standing in the door of that motel happened only 7 days after this. His is June 30th, 2015. This crop formation is June 23rd, 2015. Sergeant CJ did receive more telepathic downloads coming into his head at night. He said the squares and lines came faster than before, so it was hard for him to write it all down. He also could see that some of the squares were darkened, and he managed to get some of the new communication written down along with his comments about what was happening. From October 27th to the first week of January 2016, Sergeant CJ was waking up a lot yelling. I talked with his wife, and she said he would wake her up talking loudly and was often saying a string of numbers. She told me near tears how much it scared her, and she wanted it all to stop. Sergeant CJ said he was trying to concentrate on the dark shadings in the squares that he had not been able to copy before because the images moved too fast in his mind's eye. He says it's moving like a stream from right to left, like a screen out here, and they just keep going. But finally, he thought he was getting some of it in these new pages. Horace Drew in Australia researched binary codes and found this one at thinkersmith.org that uses squares that are either clear or blackened to represent ones and zeros. And he applied this to Sergeant CJ's new pages. And on the far left of this graphic, Dr. Drew's binary translations are in red letters. For example, imminent, that's how he got imminent. And here was more information when he started looking at the shading in the squares, not just zeros and ones, and he gets imminent threat soon upon Earth's leaders and civilizations. Expose and disband hidden knowledge to all citizens. Employ safe and controlled joint studies to all minds. Progression imperative for combined survival. Embrace this space vessel threat. 000, journey 12 light years. Ike's, it seems like referencing President Eisenhower, Ike's embedded citizens are ready. Nobody knows what this means. AIS, CLOSE, evolve, and then 6 ones. Royal Emerther warning expose foreign technology to all. Evolutionary advancement needed to prevent takeover, brackets the number 3 and a quote mark. In the last paragraph is that all caps word emerther that is associated with this Council of 5. Then, on February 18, 2016, Sergeant CJ found that he had added 5 new lines of squares and lines without darkening any of them. And Sergeant CJ emailed me, and I got them to Horace Drew, and there was a real surprise. See those 5 clumps of letters? This is what we got out of the binary code. And Dr. Drew knew that this last KI meant in Old Ancient Sumerian the word earth. So I sent the words to Professor Joshua Jeffers, PhD, Research Specialist, Royal Inscriptions of the Neo-Assyrian Period Project, University of Pennsylvania Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology, Babylonian Section, Philadelphia. And here is his March 24th, 2016 literal reply to me. The first 2 words and the 4th word look to be Akkadian and not Sumerian. The first could be the god Nabu, but without the cuneiform, it is difficult to say since there is no divine classifier before it here. Nabu was one of the 3 most important gods in Sumeria. Nabu was the keeper of the tablets of destiny that recorded humanity's fate. He was son of Marduk and grandson of Enki, Ea of the Anunnaki. Nabu's grandfather, Ea, is the creator and protector of humanity because Ea created humans out of clay to be worker slaves for the Mesopotamian gods. But the supreme god, Enlil, was irritated by the noisy humans and the noise they made, apparently because we aren't telepathic and we have to talk out loud all the time. So Enlil wanted to destroy Ea's human slave creation with a devastating flood. But Ea realized that Enlil was what he was up to, and he got a friend to build an ark so that humanity could escape God Enlil's act of annihilation. and we've all heard all sorts of variations on the Noah story. Professor Jeffers continued, the second word, rakbu, would be the noun rider from the verb rakabu, to ride, frequently upon a horse or chariot. The middle word could possibly be the word for the city of Larsa in southern Mesopotamia, written out phonetically, but the H is nonsensical for Sumerian and Akkadian and is puzzling. The fourth word, sanu, could be an infinitive of the verb to do again, or a second time, or even to be different and strange, and the fifth word, ki, by itself can be Sumerian and would mean earth or land. Now, I've talked about this translation with several people knowledgeable about Sumerian and Akkadian cuneiform, and they say this really could add up to the Sumerian Nabu is returning to earth in a chariot. So in summary, CJ's squares and ones and this information and Peniston's information and other people who have had variations and the crop formations all seem to have something to do with a warning that humans are not going to survive if we don't advance. Binary code coming into human minds in dreams or from touching symbols on alien machines like what happened in Rendlesham Forest was apparently of great interest to America's Defense Intelligence Agency. The DIA had remote viewers working at Fort Meade, Maryland, next door to the National Security Agency in 1986. Remote viewer Lynn Buchanan worked in a DIA unit called DTS. Their goal was to research how accurately psychic abilities could be used in their spy program called Stargate. On July 14, 1986, one of Lynn's assigned practice targets was the Rendlesham Forest incident. He doesn't know that. They only learn later. They just have a target. Only his monitor knew the target. Further, Lynn knew nothing about the military mystery that had occurred 6 years before on December 28, 1980. This was in 1986. He knew nothing about RAF Bentwaters. The world didn't know anything about RAF Bentwaters until the end of 1983. But what Lynn did see in remote viewing seems to link to the repeating theme in all the binary code messages about planetary survival for aliens, humans, or both. I interviewed Lynn Buchanan about this 2008 CIA released document. It is Lynn's original 1986 Rendlesham Forest controlled remote viewing session. None of us, including Lynn, knew it had been unclassified and posted on the CIA website until John Burroughs was told to go to a specific URL on the web by somebody he did not know. And there was this remote viewing by Lynn Buchanan. The following audio segment from my interview with Lynn about the 1986 session begins as he was seeing inside a craft in Rendlesham Forest and trying to find a pilot and a propulsion unit.
I got that the driver of this vehicle is not in the vehicle, he's somewhere else.
Like this object that you are remote viewing in Rendlesham Forest could be a drone that is not manned, but that the intelligence associated with this is somewhere else.
Yeah, and that's when I got AOL break. ATs. So moving back to the place with the yellow light, that's when I got an incubator. I definitely realized that this young person, whatever, was in the place of the yellow light, and that it was an incubator. Putting my analyst hat on, I would tend to say from this one session that this craft was looking for an ideal place, and once it found it, that incubator would open up and provide a living space for whatever was in it.
And you mean that the incubator in the black glassy craft, which is the outside version we have from the Peniston drawing, it would then deposit the extraterrestrial life forms in the incubator in a site on this planet to grow into whatever those extraterrestrials are.
That would be the analysis of that one session, yes.
Now, you did other remote views on RAF Bentwaters later on.
I was tasked with finding the power source. In fact, I still didn't know really what the Bentwater thing was. I got the propulsion system was a very small, enclosed thing that didn't really hook up to the craft, but was in some way providing a field of energy around the craft. And it was in an enclosed container type thing. When I was told to mentally move into the container to find out what was going on, I was not able to do that.
And this is the black box that you encountered in that very first July 14th, 1986 remote viewing. You didn't know where you were at the time, and you didn't know what it was.
That was it, yeah. And this energy type box has come up in several other things, like Sacsayhuaman that has, I think, 100-ton stones.
Sacsayhuaman is in Cusco, Peru.
Yeah, and there was a tasking about how those were moved. I've heard a lot of people say those were moved by sound and all that, but that's not what I got in my remote viewing session. I got that there was some kind of an object that emitted energy that could surround something and make it to where you could just pick it up.
Right, it would neutralize gravity.
Yeah. I had a task one time of the Utsuobune, which was an ET that landed in northern Japan. In that case, this female-looking being came out of the ship. She carried this box with her, and she never let anybody have this box. And I think the box, whatever was in the box, was what made the ship move.
Time machines, incubators of alien life trying to survive in planet-seeding missions, ET hybrids and clones, eons beyond us, as the MJ-12 documents say. Whistleblowers have reported that alien technologies can make their various spacecraft, androids, and other ET technologies invisible to human eyes. This naval ship fading into invisibility is an October 2015 Northrop Grumman Facebook posting. In addition to invisibility, the extraterrestrial technology is described as functioning with self-activating software that can neutralize gravity and project three-dimensional holograms as camouflage that human minds and eyes cannot detect in the Earth's environment. The alien goal, they say, is to harvest genetic material from this planet's animal and human life in order to create a large ongoing supply of rapid cycle cloned and hybridized body containers with very advanced technology that some people in the human abduction syndrome refer to as resurrection tubes or technology. I first learned about the cloning tubes the first week of March of 1991 when I received in the mail a large envelope that contained an audio cassette. And there was a letter and several color drawings from a woman named Linda Porter, California. She was born in 1946 and began having dramatic experiences with non-humans by age 12 in 1958. She had decided it was important to reach me after hearing a conference presentation that I had given in California concerning eyewitness testimony about non-human intelligences interacting with our planet, and she was concerned about her vulnerability as a person caught up in the human abduction syndrome and was frightened about the United States government's policy of hiding the alien presence. Her letter began, quote, "We abductees are caught in the middle of a series of ongoing events that will one day prove to be historically significant to the future of the Earth. Unfortunately, because of our continuing non-voluntary interactions with these beings, we have, in a sense, become victims of both sides of the phenomena. On the one hand, we are used by the aliens for their own purposes, whatever those purposes may be. On the other, if we speak out, we risk ridicule from the public and in some cases possible harassment and or intimidation by government and military personnel. If you could look directly into those creatures' eyes, you'd realize that every detail of your life, no matter how personal, how mundane, how minute, it's known to them. It makes me wonder, are we some kind of Ken and Barbie beings, dolls being played with by an emotionally immature race of beings with no sense of morality? Or are we pawns held in the grasp of a dying race that will do anything for their own survival, including the cold-blooded manipulation of another species, we humans, and the brutal mutilation of helpless animals? Unless a person has been through the trauma of an abduction, they cannot comprehend how these entities can strip the mind and soul as easily as they can strip the clothes off a body. They scan details of a person's life with such facility that they make you feel as if you are an interesting piece of lint caught between their toes. In the blink of an eye, these beings devastate all personal freedom, all sense of privacy, and all prospects for living a normal existence. A person's life is never the same again. He or she is changed forever, close quote. Linda Porter's words speak for a lot of abductees who have interacted with gray, blonde, tall, white, reptilians, or insect humanoids. But some abductees think that there are friendly non-humans that are actually trying to help humans advance to more stability that will help the non-humans to survive as well, that there's some quid pro quo here. In this 1995 Thanksgiving letter to me, Linda Porter wrote, "The people who live on the earth, those who will survive the destructive changes to come, will be evolving into a new species of being. I'm not referring right now to the time travelers from Earth's future. They are here also." That was something that was necessary because Earth's governments got hold of a dangerous technology that greatly altered Earth's future for the worse. Remember the mistake I told you about? Some type of technology fell into the wrong hands, and the future travelers were sent back in time to change that. I don't know if it has been changed, at least not yet, but that was an entire sidebar to evolution that was never meant to happen. Linda Porter was the first of half a dozen people in the human abduction syndrome that I've interviewed who experienced being raised and lowered in a tube of light and passing through walls that she and other abductees say feels like thousands of little feathers all over their bodies. Linda said the light tube is different from the tunnels that opened up inside of her bedroom. Quote, "The beam is used only to transfer people from Earth to a craft and back. The tunnel is a physical created hole from one dimension to another dimension. Traveling through the tunnel was what made me ill. It had something to do with the change in physical density of two differing dimensions." Linda told me in 1963, when she was 17 years old, she was abducted from her Covina, California home by gray-colored beings with large eyes. These gray beings seem to be the extraterrestrial biological entities, or EBENs, that are described in leaked government documents as friendly and concerned about human Earth evolution, but military and intel people who are telling the truth, I think, say, even though the EBENs, we consider them allies, we know that they lie. Linda Porter was shown a procedure to transfer the soul or life force from a dying man into a healthy younger clone of the man that Linda could see in one of the cloning resurrection tubes. The gray being told Linda telepathically that the same soul transfer would be done with her. The gray explained to her that she had rheumatic fever as a teenager that damaged her heart. The gray non-human said it was vital that Linda Porter's soul entity continue in the same genetic body container that she had been born with in order to accomplish an unknown alien agenda. Linda said she watched come out of the top of the dead man's spine a golden yellow-orange light that elongated in the air as it moved across the room to a row of body-sized tubes lighted from top and bottom and filled with a strange purple-looking gas. Inside the tube on the far right was a clone body of the same man, but about 10 years younger. Linda Porter said there was a problem about Earth body containers, souls, other dimensions, and altered timelines. I was told that the resurrected clone man would be relocated elsewhere, probably Australia, and would continue on with his life there, dying in Michigan and Wisconsin, and spending this time that was important to the ETs inside of the clone container in Australia, where he wouldn't run into anybody who knew him. Linda thought it was vital to the non-human entities that the man soul did continue functioning longer inside the exact same container. She said new bodies can be stored indefinitely. The containers in the sketch with the 3 people in the tubes are storage containers. The containers in both new sketches that I sent you are activation containers. They have a light in the top that must be on the person for unknown amount of hours before a body can be activated, if a body has been in storage. If newly made a body by rapid cycle cloning, it does not need light. In the sketch with the 3 people in the tubes, the body on the far right was the younger one given to the dying man. Linda Porter said, "I got the impression the aliens do not like to do this soul transfer very often. Actually, I got the feeling the aliens are not supposed to be doing this at all, but they seem to be backed into a corner and have no other recourse. They also seem to be trying to hide all of this from some higher form of life. Whatever the authority is that prohibits this soul transfer also prohibits the ETs from interfering on this planet Earth, but they are interfering. Well, whoever it is much higher evolved that they are afraid of, and it wields a great deal of power over many, many other realms of existence. There is much, much more to existence than we could ever begin to understand. Much of what we have been taught regarding the physical universe and the laws that govern it are wrong," close quote. And then they do the exact same thing to Linda Porter. And I will still remember doing my first recorded interview with her, and she got to this part, and she extended her arms to me, and she began sobbing. If you've ever been in front of somebody who does vomit sobbing, it is as if the sobs are coming like vomit out of them. She was crying so hard, but I got it. She extended her arms and hands to me, almost scream crying, "Linda, whose hands and arms are these? Who was watching? Who got transferred into that clone? Who am I?" And I have felt the echo of her anguish in every one of us. Who are we? What is this that can manipulate us in the ways that I have been describing? And she had one of the keenest insights that I have ever received from any abductee everywhere and anywhere. Quote, "The universe is built on sound patterns, which is why so many different world dimensions can exist in the same space. Each is on a different frequency. You disrupt a world dimension to the point that you destroy the carrier wave it exists on, and you have created a hole in existence that cannot support the dimension above or below it. Each frequency, besides maintaining its own world dimension, also supports or holds in place the one above it and below it. Everything is interdependent. There are countless worlds' dimensions occupying the same space without being aware of one another because of having their own individual octaves." She means frequencies. It's the frequencies that hold the world dimensions in place and causes it to exist safely without interfering with or even being aware of other worlds around it. This frequency acts as a buffer zone to keep everything in its place. You do anything to disrupt it and you begin to collapse, and that starts a deadly chain reaction. With all of their technology, why don't the aliens or their superiors just walk in and stop whatever it is that is wrong? Why do they need us abductees to speak for them? Something just doesn't make any sense. I wonder if we are being lied to, used for some purpose to put over ideas the aliens want us to believe. If there is an experiment, maybe if it succeeds, it will put us in competition with the aliens for something they don't want to share. Maybe they are trying to scare us out of their neighborhood, close quote. Back in the fall of 1983, a Washington, D.C. military source who claimed firsthand interaction with at least one type of non-human agreed to talk with me off the record about one of the gray types categorized by MJ12 as extraterrestrial biological entities, or the acronym EBINs. My source told me this drawing was almost like a photograph, his words, of an EBIN. He stressed that the EBINs have pear-shaped heads, not triangular with pointed chins like some other types he thought were androids that worked for the EBINs. The taller EBINs are allegedly from a desert planet orbiting the binary suns, Zeta Reticuli 1 and 2, about 39 light years from Earth. I've heard this from several people in intel and military. This pastel drawing was done by a Colorado male abductee who was lifted with his wife up in a car, and they were plunked down in a forest. This strange craft with erector set kind of legs. And in separate hypnosis sessions, the husband and the wife both were alarmed about one shared memory. Each remembered warnings from the alien beings about a catastrophe event in the couple's lifetime that would destroy much of the Earth's population, and they are now today in their 60s. But the husband said he understood that some humans would be removed to safety and then be returned later to Earth to start human life over, and that those returned people would retain the knowledge about the technology and the self-destructive culture of now prior to the cataclysm. In this information shared with abductees, is it shared because it relates to the aliens' creation of humans, or are these ET warnings a test and manipulation of human anxieties for unknown alien agendas? Are alien beings taking minds, tissues, and fluids from animals and humans to keep making clones and hybrids for life above and below ground on Earth? Why are people rendered unconscious and treated like laboratory animals? From the human point of view, it's a one-way trade route. What is taken is not paid for, and what is left behind is fear, anger, dead animals, and traumatized people. Is it, from the alien point of view, an issue of their survival at our expense, or a grand experiment in which we are the microbes under the microscopic lens? My Washington source knew about my work for Home Box Office, and I asked him this question. Is what I was shown in that document, these extraterrestrial biological entities, manipulated DNA in already evolving primates to create Homo sapien, is that true? And he said yes, it was true. And that it was very complex. I want to, I'm going by some area here that I want to get. Sherman said it was true that MJ-12 or Majestic 12 was established by one of President Harry S. Truman's executive orders in 1947. He said it was to study the UFO phenomena, to oversee retrievals of crashed disks and alien bodies, to back-engineer extraterrestrial technology, and to study captured beings referred to as EBINs. And MJ-12, he said, has always been directed to keep the public and the media ignorant of the extraterrestrial presence at all costs. And those words are written in this manual, a training manual dated 1954 by the War Office of Stanton Friedman, Bob Wood, myself, and others. This is the real deal. And in fact, Bob Wood was able to track down the original press manager in 1954 when they got a brand new monotype, and that is this book. MJ-12 today may be known as E2SCD. Sherman is a man who I combined two intel whistleblowers to protect them. So I call Sherman, these two men. They told me that the EBINs experimented genetically in Bhutan, Tibet, and Nepal, and then transplanted some of those altered human ET hybrids to what we call Central America. Specifically, he said the Mayans were an EBIN genetic experiment, and that when they disappeared in 850 AD, it wasn't because of drought. It was because the EBINs took the entire Mayan population in one huge cultural abduction, and our government does not know which planet they are all on, but they were taken to another planet. The alien presence has been here since at least the time of the dinosaurs or before. He said the EBINs collected one of each species of dinosaur and placed them either on one big planetary zoo or on different planets, and that was at least 68 million years or more ago. And I guess that they have experimented with life forms here ever since. And I asked, what about the animal mutilations? And Sherman said, they did occur and were performed by the aliens. We allowed them to conduct experiments using animals, not just cattle. I don't know if you are aware or not, but there were a lot of moose and caribou found mysteriously dead in the Arctic and Alaska. We think it was part of the EBIN experimentation, but we couldn't figure out what happened. The EBINs wanted to conduct experiments, and better animals than humans, to complicate matters in order to cover up the animal mutilations. Our government launched a military program to test certain biological drugs on animals, and that was to cover up the alien mutilation program. Anybody ever tells you that this is some military, paramilitary operation and that they have found sleeping drugs and all, you just can tell them that's a government cover story. Do the EBINs themselves enter pastures and cut the tissues from animals in mutilations? Sherman. After we had more communication with the EBINs, they explained to us, you have to understand that for an advanced civilization, you have robots and androids to do those things. And we began to understand that the EBIN androids could be anything. The androids can be configured any way the EBINs want for whatever mission the EBINs want carried out. The EBINs are controlling a big part of an operation concerning Earth, and we cannot control everything they do. But I can tell you the EBINs are big environmentalists, huge. They would make the Sierra Club look like brownie scouts. They were so worried about our nuclear tests and nuclear materials being exploded and contaminating not only the Earth, but the universe in general, and that is tearing into these other dimensions. That is the problem. Sherman, do you mean that our atomic bombs impacted other life forms or even other dimensions? Right, so that's one of the things the EBINs were very vocal about. They wanted above ground atomic tests stopped, and boy, were they stopped. From your point of view, are EBINs the only non-humans that have experimented genetically on this planet? Sherman, all I know is that the EBINs started an experiment, but they couldn't keep out other space travelers. Word got out this planet was a strange place to visit. and that different experiments were not going the way the Ebens wanted. Part of the Ebens' problems might be because there are bad guys doing experiments too, and they might harm us. And that really confuses matters when it comes to telling who wants to help humans and who doesn't. In abduction reports, people describe creatures that look like praying mantis insects. What are those? As far as I've heard, they could be very advanced androids, which can oversee long-term projects that last for thousands of years, but I'm not certain who they work with or for. I've been told that the praying mantises are one of the most sophisticated androids in the entire universe, and that they can oversee an entire solar system's birth to death as one consciousness. How that is possible in an organic form or a cyborg form, I have no idea, because that would be billions of years with one consciousness. What is the relationship between the Greys and the Ebens? Well, they were enemies at one time. They are supposed to live without war today, but the Ebens have no control over the Greys. The Greys do their thing, and the Ebens do theirs. Is there a pecking order among the alien types? To the best of our knowledge, no cooperation exists between the different alien groups. And I think there was a war about 6,000 years ago between the Ebens and the Blondes or Nordics over territorial rights to a planet somewhere. I don't know if it was out at Zeta Reticuli or around here or what. So both groups, the Ebens and the blonde humanoids, make android creatures to do work for them on different planets? Sherman, that's what I understand. Androids come in many different types: insects, reptilians, greys, humanoid blondes, or men in black, and others. All have an advanced implanted brain that can operate on its own or by remote control. Remote control could be from light years away. Ironically, we think some of these genetically engineered creatures have a higher intelligence than their creators. The Ebens and the blonde humanoids know how to mix and match genomes and DNA easily. They can make robots or androids that can be anything they want them to be, and remember, the aliens are millions of years advanced beyond us. Sherman said the Ebens even make blonde containers that the Ebens control and put their life force into, like what Linda Porter was shown. And then the blondes make Eben-looking container bodies that the blondes project their life force and consciousness into. That means a war of enemies in which each enemy is making the mirror of its enemy to control. Hang on to that, as wild as it seems, because what I've just said to you, I think, is going to the core of what is happening on this planet right now in the Middle East. And the Ebens genetic experimentation in Tibet, does that connect somehow to the Dalai Lama? I'm thinking about reincarnation through different beings and the different cycles of life. Would that concept relate to an Eben supposedly telling an Air Force captain in 1949, this is true, that the recycling of souls is the machinery of this particular universe? Sherman, exactly. There are only so many souls that just continuously recycle. And I said, through life form bodies that are containers? Right, exactly. And if there are more container bodies than souls, because if they're hybridizing and androidizing and cyberborgs and all of this, how could they all have souls? And Sherman says, I don't know, but souls are interconnected in some way. I think that they told us that because the Ebens have been around so long, they have learned that there are only so many souls in this universe, which must be recycled. If there is a finite number of souls in the universe, and the Ebens know that, and yet we are living on a planet in which there is an exponential increase in the number of bodies, does that imply that not all bodies can have souls? And Sherman said, I guess you have a point there. And I said, and if not all body containers have souls, would the Ebens and blonde humanoids have some stake invested in souls? Like souls could be the coin of the realm, so to speak, in this universe. And Sherman said, that's possible, I guess. I never thought of it that way before. And I said, well, some abductee researchers, such as Dr. Leo Sprinkle, a Wyoming psychologist, and Harvard University psychiatrist Dr. John Mack, both stumbled onto what appears to be a continuity of the same Ebens, or maybe other gray types, present from human life to human life, because the same alien being comes up in past life regressions at both births and at deaths. And that is true. Sherman, I don't know. All I do know is that the soul, when the body container dies, the soul contains or maintains or keeps some thoughts or something from that life that was just lived. It's said in the Yellow Book that the Ebens are concerned about human souls if our particular species continued on its current course. They are afraid we would damage our container bodies, and that could damage the souls. Well, how would our body containers damage our souls? I don't know. I realize the containers are the human bodies. And that was why they were so concerned with what we have been doing, the wars and so forth. They are afraid that the souls will be damaged by our containers. One of the MJ-12 guys who had seen more of the Yellow Book talked to me about an analogy. He said, when you put something in a container and you pour it out, think of paint. There's always some residue that remains. Something remains in that soul. So when you pass the soul on in different containers, it picks up the residues of all the different containers it has been in, and a little of each remains and stays throughout. I guess there is an eternity. There's no end. I asked the MJ-12 guy, does the soul wear out after so many recycles? He said, no, souls never wear out. The Supreme Being makes sure that doesn't happen, close quote. I asked Sherman about this whole issue of recycling of souls, and is there a devil out there somewhere? And Sherman answered, there is an evil force. Even the Ebens talk about it. There is a supreme being, and then there is the evil one, the evil entity. The Ebens are as scared of that evil entity as we are of the devil. And I ask MJ-8, where is the devil? And Sherman said that he was told, I don't know. But what worries me is that if the Ebens are scared of him, I'm damn scared of him, because the Ebens can control everything. They have been around this universe and they've done everything. And if they believe in the same supreme being that we call God, and they say there is an evil one, then there really is a devil. I ask, would the devil be equal to and opposite of the positive God? Are there two gods? And Sherman answered, I don't know. You can think about that forever. There's another thing that puzzles me. The Ebens say that everything that occurs in our time span in this universe has occurred before everything. I guess it means we're just right in the middle of a huge big circle, and it just goes around and around again. And the way I see this is that Earth was created, and one day, 5 billion years from now, the sun is going to expand, and Earth will be engulfed and destroyed, and everything goes back into a big bang, and then everything starts all over again. And I ask, well, when the Yellow Book talked about the Supreme Being that created the universe, did it say anything about parallel dimensions, parallel timelines, or anything else like that? And Sherman said, no, nothing. The aliens talked about the vastness of the universe, that there are life forms all over. It talks about a supreme being creating the souls and creating the containers and distributing a limited number of souls to the containers. And to the Ebens, it's just basic facts. I ask, if the Ebens made us and put us here, there has to be a reason. Are we a garden growing containers for souls to be harvested for some reason? And Sherman answered, well, it's another good question. All I can tell you is that one elderly man with MJ-12 told me, quote, you don't want to know the answer to that question. It was put to me another way in 1980. A man who's dead now, he worked for the CIA, he was retired. I was struggling after animal mutilations with what the world was going on. And he said, I know from having read some documents that the Ebens have told us the truth is that all the universes, multiple, are like, look at a beach, and every grain of sand on a big beach is a different universe. Not a galaxy, a different universe. And that all of these universes are surrounded by a big, dark sea. And when he was asked, what is the big, dark sea? It was the same answer. You don't want to know. Sherman, some abductees also say that the main reason for the animal mutilations and human abductions has to do with the creation of a hybrid species. But no one knows whether the hybrids are supposed to replace the current Homo sapien container model. There is a sense that whatever the non-humans are up to, it has something to do with survival, theirs and ours. Sherman said, maybe. All I know is that the Ebens are supposed to have manipulated DNA in primates long before humans were created. So there must have been a series of experiments like Neanderthal before Cro-Magnon, and Neanderthal's gone, so who knows what's on the agenda for humans, close quote. Centuries of genetic manipulation by other intelligences was reinforced for me in 1999 by a retired Defense Intelligence Agency analyst. He said his job had been to monitor, quote, the geopolitical, territorial conflicts of 3 competing extraterrestrial factions of species on this planet, close quote. Those alien presences have based themselves underground in various parts of Earth, and at least one type has been terraforming this planet and genetically manipulating Earth life for some 270 million years. They made the dinosaurs, he said, an 85 million year experiment. And what he suspected is that the aliens either allowed or provoked the large meteorite to hit the Gulf of Mexico 65 million years ago that erased, on purpose, their dinosaur experiment. And next came the rise of mammals that led to primates and to us. The DIA analyst was especially interested in the resurrection technology described by Linda Porter. He knew about the cloning technology from his DIA work, and he described how concerned he and his superiors were about human body containers, camouflaging the conflicts of an alien presence through the often chaotic evolution of Homo sapiens sapien. Who are we really? Does someone else own or battle to keep ownership of Earth? Are humans unwitting pawns in a multi-level chess game? And if so, is there an alien ally, a Prometheus or an Enki trying to help us advance more rapidly in order to better survive, as Sergeant CJ said? Is there truly some kind of alien threat from beyond the alien presence underground on Earth in our solar system? Like what happens if an Osiris or Zeus or Jehovah or Nabu returns? Our planet is now in the midst of its sixth mass extinction of plants and animals because of humanity's spread around the planet, destroying and paving over so much ground that once sustained abundant Earth life. We are currently experiencing the worst periods of die-off since the loss of the dinosaurs 65 million years ago. Scientists estimate we are now losing animals, plants, and insects at 1,000 to 10,000 times the rate prior to the 20th century, with dozens of species going extinct now every day. That means by the end of this 21st century, as many as 30 to 50% of all Earth species could be gone. Perhaps the non-human intelligences which watch this planet can see humanity's own future hanging in a balance, but will not allow humans to destroy the Earth. Earth, as a laboratory, trumps the survival of Homo sapiens sapien. Perhaps that is why the aliens increased their interference at nuclear missile sites and human abductions, despite aggressive government efforts to keep everything about the alien presence a big secret. One fact is certain. No matter who made humans or why, life on Earth is not guaranteed. But if the chokehold on the truth were released, and the entire human family could know everything the governments and militaries are hiding about an alien presence on this planet that still manipulates DNA and harvests Earth life, perhaps human tribal warfare would slow down in the alien concocted Garden of Eden where a reptile was the teacher. In November 1984, I was a speaker at the University of Nebraska with astronomer and QFOS founder J. Allen Hynek. He was talking about UFOs and I was talking about animal mutilations, and he said, I want to recommend the best and most important book I've ever read, Theosophy by Rudolf Steiner. And we ended up talking about souls, J. Allen Hynek and me. Not aliens and not UFOs. We talked about souls and recycling. And neither of us knew that within a short period of time that he would die from a brain tumor. And I would not learn from abductees about the ET soul transfer technology for 7 more years with Linda Porter in 1991. But one realization has become very real for me. There is a secret war on Earth. One group of other intelligences wants to see humans evolve into oneness with a divine field responsible for all matter worlds. Another intelligence wants to stunt human evolution so it can continue to harvest us genetically for its own self-serving purposes. Thus, the confusion of contradictory literature and conflicting religions throughout human history. Religious inspirations have been used to homogenize the thinking of various human groups to make them more controllable by the competing non-human intelligences. But those have often been ET inspirations for manipulations, not the honest guidance from a divine field. Maybe like political factions, the dark party and the light party are competing over legislation to legalize the production of cloned android life outside the force of creation's recycling program of a finite number of souls. Maybe some souls are captured and put into clone bodies, which is fouling up the divine field's process. Other clones might never receive souls. That political issue about cloning for galactic trade or alien wars might explain why dramas of resurrected saviors from Osiris in Egypt to Christ in ancient Palestine, which is Israel today, have been presented repeatedly to humanity. Osiris and Christ were beings with human bodies and mysterious divinity who emphasized that death in the body does not end life for the soul and spirit. That concept underlies the Egyptian obsession with mummies and sacred rites to protect the soul at the moment of death from competing forces. If there is a finite number of souls, as the government whistleblower I call Sherman says, are under a strictly regulated God Force recycling program, then clone bodies and androids might end up outside, excluded from that recycling process. And Homo sapiens sapien clearly is somebody's hybridization. The full scope of the complex, multi-layered chess game for souls, spirits, and bodies of humans, extraterrestrials, angels, and time travelers might be beyond human ability to understand. One scientist in New England, who has been abducted by gray beings who repaired his diseased heart, told me that he was shown holograms that depicted a series of universes in pairs, mirrored images, each the opposite of the other from the subatomic to the macro. He says, quote, "Our universe is paired to another universe, which is completely opposite of this one. There, the skies are glowing white with dark suns, colors are indescribable and iridescent, time flows to the past, the opposite of ours, where time flows to the future. Like a conveyor belt, at the moment of death in our universe, we move through a tunnel into the mirror universe where it is all light. There, time moves to the past and souls return from there back into this universe," close quote. Perhaps the unique isolation that each human feels and the peculiar melancholy that a dark sky filled with stars can evoke have something to do with knowledge that's buried in our genes and our souls. A sensing that we have ancient intimacies with other beings and other worlds. And now in this time of revolution, when the whole planet will know we are not alone in this universe, our greatest challenge as a species will be to stand up unafraid before the old gods and watchers. Ultimately, there is a common bond among all life forms, ebbing and flowing on spirals of different frequencies, supported by a singular force, an invisible matrix of energy from which everything emerges and to which everything returns. And I thank you.